Okay. I literally printed the chart. And I did it with my campaign money. At Kinko's or FedEx or whatever it is. Okay. But
Right. Well, that's fancy. I'm not there yet.
yeah. But I mean, it means it's out of date because every time we post stuff, it gets updated, but it gives me the gist.
Got it.
Because I prefer paper.
What is that?
This is the better.
Oh.
Not the, this is whatever the online version was when they took off. So it is not correct, but it's
No.
directionally correct.
Yeah, no, it's not correct. That is accurate. We have 1 more minute before 1 o'clock strikes. You can call cab late.
And Bob, lawyer Bob.
Did he agree to come?
Yeah.
I mean, I sent him the invite. I just.
Yeah.
Oh, right, he did. He sent you that, email. Let me go check the door.
I don't have my phone, so I'm not checking my email.
I'll check the door and see if he's outside.
You're differentiating a lawyer, Bob.
Robert.
Oh.
So there's Robert Kavanaugh on council. There's Robert Geary, who we call lawyer Bob, and then there's IT Bob,
Yes.
who
Yeah,
does,
that's.
yeah, yes.
Yes, okay.
So- So there's 3 Roberts.
Okay.
I don't know how he feels about it.
No, I just want to,
It's just
I mean,
too
like,
many.
that's clear, but I was just like, I don't think I've ever. Oh, got it now.
Yeah, because he does not go by Bob, but people keep calling him Bob.
Okay.
He's not a Bob, he's not a Bob, he's not a Rob, he's a Robert. Hey, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How's your day going? That's good.
I haven't had any football jokes yet, so.
Oh, do you like usually get those?
No.
At work? Okay, good. Like, I wasn't realizing that that was a thing, like, to like, off you, like, on social media.
Yeah, the university, Binghamton University always does one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this one was, it was like that they were gonna put in like a water park or something at the university. They always like say they're gonna do something that's
That's
completely
just like
ridiculous
that.
and I always see that and that's when I remember that it's April Fool's.
Back when I worked at a department store in college, it was more of a thing.
Yeah,
So that was sort of ongoing. It wasn't necessarily April Fool's specific.
They just wanted to prank people.
We pranked each other.
Oh, like ever, okay. I thought you meant like statement from the store.
Few of us
Okay.
pranked each other.
Hmm.
Each ran that one. Carly graduated.
oh no.
Congratulations and stuff on it, but like misspelled things.
They ran around the whole time.
So we had like a packing style one, and if you like, yeah, like 3 or 4 people, so we.
My friends in high school, their big pranking thing was, we called it forking. They would put forks in people's yard, like plastic forks.
Yeah, you load the yard with plastic forks.
Yeah. And you can't mold them on and do anything until you
gotta take them
pull
out.
each one out.
They look like,
Oh, they do, oh, yeah,
especially like before rivalry games.
okay. I remember that was a thing. I never did it to anyone, but that was definitely a prank that people did.
Yeah.
Oh, it's zooming in.
I just emailed you because I didn't realize you were here. So sorry, Bob. Kaz is joining our with me.
Gotcha.
Great. Then we'll be all set. I'm gonna close one of these. These good for appearance. I'm grabbing the-
In case you don't recognize it.
Only worked on it for me.
Okay. Call this meeting to order. Great, we rise for, oh, we do have a flag. We can rise for the pledge. Let's do it. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
The flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh,
Want me to do the
Roll.
quick roll? Great, Chair Middleton, Chair Matavetsky, so sorry, from last night. Chair Matavetsky,
absolutely, I'm present.
Councilmember Murray, Councilmember Kavanaugh.
Virtually present.
That is correct. And that is all of the members on this committee. Thank you very much.
Yeah, full attendance. Okay, so first on our discussion is local law 25-02 considered in this committee. Local law to amend chapter 295 of the code of the city of Binghamton requirements for spinning defects. So we at our previous business meeting, this law was voted down, but we still need something to deal with the liability issues on the city. So we're convening this meeting. This is the key agenda item on today's meeting to figure out something that is amenable to the majority of council so that we can walk the line of having city accountability and having financial protection for the city. So that's what we're here to discuss. Prior to this meeting yesterday, I met with our attorney to try and hash out some ideas. Do you want me to present or the idea of like having PDF?
Well, yes,
Yeah,
the
with
idea
the notary.
that was kicked around is an alternative. Or as an addition to the hand delivery would be to do it by email. And basically have a dedicated email box where these would come in and would be set out, it's like this is the email where it goes to. The way this works is we get these notice of claims that come in and then we have to file and log them in a book. So trying to find a good process for being able to make sure that when these form notices come in, we have a way to track and log that. It is kind of what the concern is from my end of it. And I think that having a dedicated email box is probably the best way to do that. For creating like an electronic way of submitting things.
Can we like back up and like, do you mind like just walking? So, things first. That sounds better than where we were. I wonder if we're gonna go that route. The only thing that I would like to suggest is it possible to have some type of response to someone to confirm that their email has been received? I think that so many times if you send it off and then you hear nothing, and even though we may have a better internal process, I think it's important to acknowledge to the sender that, like they've successfully submitted whatever notice that they.
Yeah, I don't see any issue with being able to do that logistically.
Okay.
You have to check with IT, but I know
Yeah.
IT has kind of set up stuff before where you at least get some kind of response
Yeah.
back saying, hey,
Like
we received it, yeah.
Yeah, it's something simple. So that would be my suggestion for that, but I guess for me, I guess I could use me, right? I still use that.
Oh, we are all still learning.
Can you like walk me through what the existing like process is, like baby steps?
Yeah,
Or
so,
what it was before
What it
the
was,
court
yeah.
ruling.
Yeah, like,
So, yeah, before the court ruling, because that's what,
Yeah.
this law is being introduced
Yes.
to deal with the fact that our existing process
yes.
opened us up for liability following judge's ruling.
Yeah, so like what the proposed kind of process is, because the reason why I like wasn't in favor of it, because I felt like there were like too many barriers for someone to like successfully complete this process, right? So then now with adding an option for possibly emailing, we still have the notary process. So can you like walk me through what the proposed new like process would be? Is
Yeah.
what I think I'm asking for.
So, and this might be a little repetitive, but the background of all this is that New York State has enacted legislation that basically allows the city to require prior written notice of any kind of issue with streets, whether it be like potholes, ice cream lane, whatever. And you can have very formal requirements for that to try and limit the city's exposure because the city has a lot of streets, it has a lot of sidewalks. There's a lot of stuff that the city is responsible for maintaining. And so it's important that the city has some way to formally require notice so that not every phone call that comes in, not every, verbal complaint that gets made, not everything that comes in triggers that notice requirement. Otherwise, you'd end up with, notice on all these issues and having to try and fix them all in a timely manner. So we're allowed to enact these sort of formal notice requirements. Prior to the recent Court of Appeals case with the City of Albany's prior written notice law, the way it worked and the way it was understood to work is that basically the notice had to be physically given, whether it be by mail, and different jurisdictions have different specific requirements, but basically that some sort of hard copy notice had to come into the, in our case, Commissioner of Public Works. And then that would get filed in a book and registered as we've gotten this complaint, and then the city would go out and address it. So separately, the city had this app that allowed you to take pictures of potholes and make a complaint. And prior to the court case, it was understood that doesn't trigger notice requirements. So when this happened up in Albany with their app, the court basically said, oh, well, you got these complaints through your app that allow people to report complaints. And that's going to be treated as prior written notice to the city because the commissioner up there received a report from the app to send out crucifix stuff. So in response to all that, this Binghamton, as well as other cities, have been looking at their prior written notice statutes to try and set out more specific language around what's formal and what's not. Because the specific language issue is the language regarding notice that's actually given. And rather than relying on that language, basically spelling out here's the specific process and requirements for triggering notice.
Okay.
So the short answer to summarize all that as to how it would work prior to this court case was we would get something in writing from someone saying, here's what the defect is, that would get filed. We're trying to get back to that type of process where something has to come in either with a physical copy or by email, if that's how we want to add an additional option for submitting these. And those are sort of our two specific avenues for making these formal reports of problems.
So the app is just, so with this kind of new process where the app, where we would establish whatever this is, the process is gonna be for formal notification of the defect. Once we have that outlined, then we would get the app back. And that would just be like notifying us, just like matter of fact, like, hey, just so you know, there's a pothole, but it wouldn't be considered formal notice of a defect. It's just like a resident, just making sure you're aware, we got this little hole.
Crowdsourcing.
Yes. What did you say?
Crowdsourcing, yeah, crowdsourcing the conditions of the road.
Yes, okay, so then we have these two pathways, but only what we're discussing now would be considered that formal notice of.
Which would allow them to create a lawsuit against the city.
If we don't fix it.
If we don't fix it. But so how does that work? Like, is there like, is it based on a window of time? Does it depend on the severity of the issue?
And that-
Does it, like, do they actually have to have an injury? Like what?
So
Those are all questions.
All those
Thank you.
the easy answer is yes. All of that kind of plays into it. It depends what it is in terms of like what your time frame is, what specifically you have to do, right? I mean,
You meaning
The city.
the city,
Okay.
I mean, any municipality, right?
Okay.
So, if we had a notice of defect that, ice has accumulated on a sidewalk and there was an ice storm that just finished an hour ago, the city has time to go out and do that, right? It's not like we have to go and the next.
Stop plowing the roads, take.
Correct. It wouldn't trigger liability for that right away. Now, if the ice was because, say, the city had a pipe running out over the sidewalk and it's constantly putting water out on the sidewalk, well, now you need to do something. Or, let's say that, the city's doing work on one of its water lines and digs up part of the street and leaves a 3-foot trench. You need to do something about it, whether it's, putting up a barrier around it or some sort of signs. You don't necessarily have to fill it in right away.
Yeah.
But you do have to do something to at least mitigate it, and then you do have to eventually fix it.
Okay. Where would I find the information? I'm just for my own, like, better understanding that, like, what meets the threshold, right? So like you just gave like, I guess I would consider it like severe examples, but like what an uneven sidewalk, that's a trip hazard, or I'm just curious, I don't know, like, what would be considered an actual like viable complaint,
So
anything?
uneven sidewalks are something that could fall into this.
Okay.
A lot of times there's stuff like this, like uneven sidewalks or potholes or whatever
Yeah.
that someone calls in about, or that we get registered to the app or whatever.
Yeah.
Where there's still the requirement for prior written notice, like if someone tripped on the uneven sidewalk, one of the things that would come up would be was there prior written notice to the city about it?
Got
And again,
In the case where they're looking to sue.
yes.
Right.
Okay.
Is that right? I would.
Bob, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, is there a level of specificity that is sort of required, or recognized, like, the sidewalks downtown are terrible versus, a tree in the utility strip has heaved the piece of sidewalk in front of 5 Druid Place.
Yeah, so there's a severity piece in terms of, what you have to do to address it. Just because a sidewalk is somewhat uneven and cracked doesn't necessarily trigger a liability issue for the city, if the sidewalk's been there for 20 years and hasn't been redone.
Right. But as far as specificity though, like, I'm thinking more in terms of if we create an email box, if we create an actual digital form that would create a specific type of, a specific issue being cited versus just a broad complaint.
So there's a couple things with the form that so yes, stepping back, specificity, basically it has to provide the city with enough information to figure out what the problem is. So a lot,
There is no. There's no form. Oh.
yeah, I mean,
Mayor,
so
I'm suggesting a form.
Okay. Oh,
there's,
okay, so this is what would go into the form, but the written
If there's-
notice prior was just a summary from a general letter then from folks?
yes.
Okay, all right, that's what I think.
Yeah, and there's the statutory requirements are set out under the state statute, which is general municipal law 50.
Okay,
So that puts out sort of what the specific requirements are, what's supposed to be contained in the notice in terms of details. 'Cause it basically has to be enough information that the city can figure out what the problem is. You know, if you say, well, there was a pothole on Riverside, I mean, that the city would really be able to figure out what the pothole was. Now, if you name like an intersection or you say the address, well, now you're starting to get into those specifics of now the city knows, you know, where the problem is and what the issue is. A pothole at, you know, 50 Riverside. Go, we can look, we can find it and see, is there a pothole? And if there is, we can fix it. So there is a certain specificity that's required under the state statute. The challenge with a form is that not every case necessarily falls into a neat form. And it's really up to the individual to decide, you know, how much information do I want to or need to provide to the city to give them notice of what's going on. You know, the city can't really tell people like, hey, here's what you specifically need to provide. And we can tell them like, hey, you know, we need to know where it is, what the problem is, but it's really up to them to determine what they want to include in their notice of defect.
Okay.
The other challenge with the form is, you know, I would want to do like a form that gets filled out and submitted on the website, because there's not a good way to draft the ledge to specify how that gets submitted versus by email. Like we can specify a specific email inbox where you send the notice to.
I mean, I'm pretty sure we can have a form that gets submitted to an email box, but,
But you're saying
um,
with the form is that there may be situations or circumstances that may not, the questions on the form isn't gonna pull out the information that we would need, so then in that case, the form wouldn't necessarily work. Is that what
Be
you're
a
saying?
text box.
Yeah,
or
like,
letter entry.
tell us what happened.
Yeah, I mean,
Like describe your experience here, and then move on, kind of thing.
you could create sort of a general text box for it. Again, like, I guess for me, it's like, is the form just basically like, here's the letterhead and here's your text box for entering stuff? Are you getting into more like specifics of what you're including?
I mean, I would wanna know if someone is, for me, right? Like, if there is an issue, I think it would prioritize response if someone has been hurt, if multiple people have been hurt. Like, I think that those types of questions would help us to kind of prioritize, right? If there's a, let's say, uneven siren, for example, that multiple people, that, you know, that like ongoing causing issues on, I don't know, you know what I'm trying to say. It's an ongoing issue, right? I think that, so.
So I
Does that
understand,
make sense?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
it makes sense,
Yeah.
and I understand where you're coming from in terms of, you know, that information being helpful, people saying, hey, this is a big problem, we need to do something about it.
Yeah.
But like, under the statute,
Mhm.
I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure there's like no requirement for how many people have gotten hurt. Under the state statute. And that's where it gets hard with the form where it's just like, are you creating additional requirements that aren't in the statute?
Okay.
Or are you missing requirements from the statute that need to be met?
Got it.
And that's where, that's part of the reason why the city doesn't have a form for these.
Okay.
Is, you know, we don't want someone submitting a form thinking, oh, I've met the requirements. And
To
then
get this addressed.
later on finding out, well, you filled out the form, but you didn't include everything we needed.
But we're not telling them what we need. So then how would we reset that expectation? It just feels like. like, is it here? Like, you could fill it out, and you may have everything you need, but we're not telling you what you need. So then, at minimum, if we're creating this pathway for folks, whether it be in writing or online or form or no form, do we at least have some parameters for them to say, if you're gonna submit this notification, then we would need X amount of information.
Yeah, and I think it's just what that form looks like is gonna drive some of that, right? Like if it's pretty simple, like, what's your name, date you're submitting it, and then, a lot of it's sort of very general, like, here's the text box, some of the stuff. You don't run into those issues of, I'm spending everything I'm supposed to. If you have a form that kind of lays out a bunch of different points that you're expected to fill out, that's where you start getting into, someone missed the form, misinterpreted what they're supposed to include, and they thought that they had filed the valid notice of defects, only to find out later they did. And that's not a situation I want the city to end up in.
Okay.
And I don't know that it's super helpful to someone that is legitimately hurt and has their claim thrown out because of that issue.
So are you recommending that there's not really, so you would just, so what are you recommending?
My position is I don't want one. If we need to have a form, we can look at creating one that tries to stay more on the general side and avoids getting into some of the issues that I've highlighted. I'd rather pass something that protects the city.
Yeah.
And we can actually get past versus doing nothing.
So here's my question for you, as a resident I'm a resident and I want to submit formal notice, and I reach out to you and I say, what should my notice include? What are you gonna tell me?
I can't advise you because I'm an attorney for the city. You need to contact private attorney to talk.
So what we're doing is, I feel like we're leaving folks in the dark to figure it out for themselves.
Yes,
Okay,
but.
I just want to be clear. Okay.
And
Okay.
the problem is that, like, my office cannot advise someone how to sue the city.
Well, it's not about, but I think that you're thinking about next step, right? And maybe I'm looking at it wrong, so I'm looking at just.
So if they just want to report it, they can go, once we have this through, they can go through the app. And
Okay,
the app will tell them when something's been moved or
Okay.
whether it's been updated. They'll get
Okay.
status on it. If their interest is fixing something,
yeah,
they can report it through the app.
yeah.
And they'll get
it's
status. And they'll, not only it'll get fixed when it gets fixed, but they'll get status on it through the
Okay.
app, right? Like,
Yeah,
like, it will say like this issue's been resolved or whatever, like
Okay.
you'll know. But
This
if
is the-
you're trying to lay the groundwork for a lawsuit,
Lawsuit.
this is the process for laying the groundwork for a lawsuit.
okay. So that makes.
So it's kind of
Okay.
a weird, awkward
Balance.
position
Oh.
because it's like,
Yeah.
we
I
want
don't-
people to get their stuff fixed. We want the
Yes.
city to be responsible and accountable for
Yes.
fixing particularly high priority and dangerous situations.
Yes.
But
Okay.
once someone's entering into this process, they're
It's
kind
clear
of
that
saying,
the
I'm-
intent is to have a formal documentation
so
that
they can.
I'm gonna move forward with action as a result of this
Yeah.
specific defect.
And once this, whatever it is that we pass, then we can get the app back and people can just
Yes.
report things as
Yes.
they, or, hey, I would like this fixed. It'd be great. Please know that this is a problem.
All right. So I'm not necessarily tied to a form. I think the sticking point for me is having additional options outside of hand delivery and mail.
Mhm.
I think that's important. And the only other sticking point for me is that having some type of response that it's been received. I think those are like the only two things that I think I would personally need to like be in agreement.
So, Robert, Does that sound cool to
Sorry,
you?
I feel like that was.
No, no.
painful now. No,
No, you know.
turn it down.
Well, I think I appreciate Bob's points about the form. I think having a, monitored secure email box that gives a received receipt is light years ahead of where we are. But still hopefully provides enough of a barrier that we're not getting spammed with legal requests, legally binding requests. So I think it's a great compromise.
So one thing
Yeah.
that hasn't come up during this meeting, but came up in our conversation was the role of a notary. Can you explain that? Is that still a piece of this, or is that?
Well, that's what was included in the draft that I submitted. I believe, which was a requirement that whatever notice was submitted, essentially be attested to the sworn that like, this is true.
So then that would mean that someone would have to write a letter, print it out, get it notarized, and then it would be uploaded in, all. Is that standard for like other municipalities? Would it be just like at that?
Some required, some don't.
Okay.
It's mostly whether or not the municipality wants to have that as additional requirement. There's not necessarily a standard practice for it across the board.
But again, you would not need that if you're using the app and you're just
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
notify the city that there's a problem that you would like fixed. You
Yeah.
take your picture, you submit it to the app.
And I feel like if you're at the point where you're pursuing this issue legally, after getting on with this. Would it be a barrier?
Yeah, I mean, it's demonstrating that you're very serious when you're on the,
Yeah. That's.
all right.
What's been the response in terms of like the app? It's like, so folks clearly know that this is a thing. I did not know that this is
Yeah.
a thing.
I didn't know until I was on council, but it was off for a while and then they restarted it when our council took over.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why it was down the last time, but it was
Yeah.
down for a while previously. Then they did some press releases about it coming back online. And then,
Do we get
And
any reports about that? Do we get feedback regarding how it's going? Like, what does that process look?
so when I was new on council, I tested some stuff because you can submit code complaints through it. You can submit, graffiti,
Yeah.
all different types of things, not just potholes.
Okay.
And I sat with like a department head, I was like, show me that you got the email.
Yeah.
And they did, so,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think it would be nice if we could get some high level reports out of it for council to know what's going on. Not the individual private stuff, but like some sense of how many things are coming in, and it seems like the data and the app should, there should be an easy way for us to start getting the reports and whether or not some of that information flows to the clerk's office would also be something that I'll consider, but maybe not in this law necessarily,
Yeah.
but it's certainly something this committee could take up in terms of trying to think about what we can do with the data from that.
And I would encourage you all to consider the model that you have with the mayor's office on service calls.
Yeah, right now we get
Yeah.
monthly reports for people who are watching this on the service calls for emergency services. So, and they're high level, it's
Yeah.
not, we don't know anybody's names or addresses, but they break it up by district. And they break it into the different categories. So, yeah, I think so a model like that with the app data would be good to see, and then we could also see like where issues are and where they're clustering and which
Yeah.
districts and,
I think that would be helpful. On a different topic.
yeah. No, but. Okay, so if nobody has a problem with this, so can you draft those modifications in? They'll have to sit for 7 days once they get out to everybody.
Excluding Sunday.
Yeah, no, excluding Sunday. And then I guess there's the question of, since we use the same title, this is on me, as opposed to introducing a new, because this one was voted down, whether or not I have to reintroduce at the work session, the next work session.
Introduction at any meeting is not a requirement to vote,
Okay,
the silence.
okay. So, if the committee members are open to signing it out once we get the revised text, then we'll be able to advance it to our next business meeting. Okay, so that's great. Okay, so we'll move on, to updates regarding general code. So yesterday I ran around and tried to talk to persons relevant to general code. Oh, those are the main person. So, basically, I talked to the mayor, I talked to our attorney. Everybody is on board that the clerk's office will be running point on, general code. And so that's, good. Everyone is on the same page on that. I got confirmation from the mayor's office that we did pay, what we owed to general code, so that will, start going. Speaking with our clerk. Oh, okay, well, I'll have, okay. We haven't gotten the engagement request yet from general code, but the, payment was really very recently made, so I believe they have a 30-day window to engage with us. So, general code, handles most cities' legislation, and it makes, you can have an app for your ledge, the charter is like automatically updated, they reconcile stuff, make sure that there's not conflicts between the state and the city charter, which we ran into with the lawsuit, right? There was a conflict between, state law and the city charter. So we want to avoid.
So this is
Such
like a
things.
subcontractor to make sure.
So all the stuff will be like linkable and stuff.
Well,
Right now, we have these
we
PDFs
we
that.
ran into a local law that was never recorded
Oh, yeah.
in our charter. That's what we.
Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of problems with our available charter online, which can cause issues with
Yeah,
legal stuff.
okay.
But just not knowing what you're supposed to do. And there's been internal issues. One of the issues that Councilman Kavanaugh recently noticed was the traffic board process hasn't been being implemented correctly. I expect the general code will be able to help us reconcile that as we move forward and try and fix things up. It seems there's been a bit of tax councils abdicating their responsibilities and that knowledge not necessarily getting passed on to new councils and whatnot. So we're gonna try and get back into compliance with our own charter, and do what we can to retroactively fix what's possible. And I guess that's kind of the highlights on that. I don't know if Sarah wants to make it for the general code discussion.
Sure.
I stated that you're gonna be running points of general code and that everyone is on the same page on that. And that the payment has been made, but it was very recent, and that there's about a 30-day window for engagement
That's
from the
correct.
payment going out.
Right, so
So-
I'm just waiting on general code to reach back out to begin the recodification process. And they're gonna be continually asking clarifying questions. Kind of waiting for that level of communication from them.
So, and then it'll just be so much, things are gonna be so much nicer for us. I'm very excited.
For everyone.
For everyone, for council members, for the media, we're trying to understand what's going on. For new employees who are trying to make sure that they're following the, you know, the rules and stuff, code rules, different things like that. It'll be easier to onboard, train, all that. All the good things. Good things are coming. Okay, the last discussion on here is, unless anyone else has anything else to say about general codes.
For your support as we move through this.
Yes. Is the rule book. We had, so I've been trying to have a running list of things that we might want to include in that. This committee is responsible for determining the rules of council, and then putting that rule book forward for a vote for all of council to buy in. We have been operating, I don't know for how long, without a rule book. But let me pulling up my running list here. So high level topics, committees, how committees actually run. It's not super clear to me. Some rule books for other cities like Buffalo and Ohio, one of the towns in Ohio that I looked at, like they actually spell out more details on leadership roles, like what does the majority leader actually do? What does the president do? What does the pro tem do?
I'd like to point out, in defense of how we've been operating, that a lot of stuff that many municipalities of our size have in their rule book or policy and procedure manuals, we have put in our charter, as far as like how the meeting is organized and when we schedule them and all that stuff. So I mean, we're not totally out of whack.
Uh,
So
we-
you're proposing
Anyway, just want to say that.
information in the charter, but also.
Well, so right now, we don't have much in terms of leadership roles in the charter. It just kind of says these roles exist without definition or, so the kind of clarity on who's doing what is not necessarily there.
Got it.
And that impacts us, but it also impacts, for example, the press, who is the appropriate person to reach out to, or why is somebody doing this or that? And it's like, oh, well, it's because of the way we're interpreting their role, but we're not explicitly stating it. Other rule books that I've seen have sections on press, like explicitly how press can engage during council meetings, things like that. They sometimes have more information about the role of the clerk. Deadlines for RLs, we have set kind of internal deadlines with the mayor's office. I believe, was it Wednesday at noon of the Monday before,
Accepting holidays.
accepting holidays, and always at the discretion of the president, but of president of city council. But we haven't put any sort of timelines towards for the public, because public are also allowed to submit requests for legislation, but there's no information for them on any sort of a timeline or expectation on that. We've been roughly keeping that council members try and stick to the same timeline as the Wednesday at noon, but actually putting that somewhere so that everyone is aware that that's the expectation and it's not just a kind of privately discussed expectation. Special presentations, so some rule books kind of spell out what to do in special presentations. We have kind of talked about about town halls, if we still would want probably to have it always be up to the discretion of the chairperson, but to have some sort of kind of standard outline that it can be that expectation unless they state otherwise, so that people know what they're coming to or what's the structure of it is going to be. And then if it's not going to be that it be explicitly shared with people so they know what they're coming to. Rules review, annual meeting, let's see, holiday schedule, executive sessions. We may want to put more information surrounding executive sessions, there's a lot of rules relating to that in terms of open meetings law and how we, what we have to state to be transparent with the public about why we're going to executive session to speak with an attorney about specific topics. But trying to put some more of that detail, because there's a lot of the rules are in kind of different places. Yes, there's some in the charter, some in the council section, some stuff in other chapters of our charter, and then you have like open meetings law, and then you have different state laws. So my thought is having it all the document in one place so that particularly a new city council person or a new council president can have access to all that information in one place is a thought. Like, for example, maybe we want to pull in to our rules book a list of all of the reports and their deadlines so that we don't have to dig around for when the quarterly comptroller report date is supposed to be, or when the corporation council reports are supposed to be due, or auditors reports, or the timeline for the possibility of the clerks receiving the raise, or the mayor receiving the raise, or the council receiving the raise. Like, there's certain things throughout the charter that are things that we are supposed to be aware of, and they're time specific. Conceivably, we'd want kind of a headlining section with like some of those dates and times so that we aren't always having to dig through everything. Some places talk about absences of council members. I don't know if that's necessary. I've seen in rule books communication policies relating to communication between council and the mayor's office. One specific example from one that I read about in Ohio talks about mayor being required to have timely updates on police and fire matters. I'm not bringing that up as something that hasn't been happening. That really, I think, has been a strong point of communication. We sometimes get like 3 a.m. emails from the mayor when there's been like a shooting or a major fire. But that type of thing sometimes is in rule books about kind of like certain types
So
of
that is happening
expectations.
as a courtesy versus
Right.
as an expectation.
Right. Ohio had some discussion of how you cancel meetings, what happens when a meeting is canceled. The sign out sheet process, like holdovers from previous year, new number, new sheet, sign out again. Like, there's certain processes that the clerks are predominantly handling, but it's not necessarily that we know exactly what's going on or that it's clear to the public, or like, it's just,
Can I just,
there's things happening. It's just not in a rule book.
okay, so,
Yeah.
that was a lot.
Oh, I got more.
Yeah. Okay, so just to clarify, you're saying that process should be housed in this committee. And then, the expectation is that as a collective, we would have a specific time to talk about what we think should be included in the
Mhm.
rule book, because, I mean, I can imagine that. Is there like suggestions with like not? It just sounds like it would be a really overwhelming document.
Yeah.
So like, I guess when that time comes, we could talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just
So
gonna
the goal is
introduce,
just-
I'm introducing it today. We are not gonna
Got it.
dig into it today. Our
Okay.
main goal, we had one main goal today, which was
Yeah.
to deal with this. But I wanted to introduce this topic while we were
that we
here,
should be
and
thinking
so that we
about.
can be thinking about it. And we'll schedule a meeting that's more focused on this, because we are technically behind the timeline set out in the charter for having a rules book.
What is
But
the
we're like
deadline?
multiple years out of date from what I can tell, so.
A little bit longer is not.
Right, I'm not gonna get too concerned about it, but it's something that we should be thinking about and working towards. So we had sign out sheet process, how things get assigned to committees. Like, because we've done a mix of this, right? So during council meetings, sometimes we vote to send something to committee. Sometimes the chairs just take it, and sometimes it seems the president decides. So I know as a council member, I don't really understand how committees work. And maybe the answer is we want all these different options, but it seems a little bit confusing to me that it's sometimes it's one way and sometimes it's another, and it's, if at the end, it's just the chair and the president deciding, then what does it mean for us to have a public vote on sending it to committee? Like, I'm not exactly sure what it means, but we've done all three. So, so some places like, have, like a liaison list. So we have, specific boards and commissions that we're on, right? In addition to being on committees. Most of those are kind of formal positions, that either the board or commission has like explicitly says that they have an ex officio, council member position. But there may be more groups that we want to have, like, make sure we're representing at. So conceivably, we might want to put together like a liaison list so that it's like public and clear which council person is responsible for being the liaison on, maybe it's a topic, or maybe it's with an organization. It's something that I've seen in other communities that they've done that with their council. So it's just like clear who's doing what. Because there's certainly a lot more work going on than is like formally and publicly available. This- I've added this one from our last meeting, like the kind of having our rule book some clarity over veto override process. Because it's different, potentially different between a local law and other types of ordinances and resolutions. So just like having that be clear, and this is how we're going to be doing it. In June, our goal is still on track for June to get a social media page going for council. We may want to include some guidelines or best practices. I don't know if it's in the rule book to just say this is the intent of our social media. These are the types of things we intend to post on it. Just to have that housed somewhere formally that we've all agreed to. And one of the other kind of rulesy things that came up during my term was this idea of creating a special business meeting versus a regular business meeting. And like, if we want to like make that kind of explicit, I mean, we did previously was I think it was at a special business meeting, we set a date as part of a part of our regular business meeting for a different date than had been set in the beginning of the year, but it was voted. So a special business meeting is can be designated just by the president. President can set any special business meeting they want, whenever they want. And so I think our distinction was with a regular business meeting, we had a vote of council to set that date. So it was a public vote on setting a date as opposed to the president setting a date. So I don't know if we want to make that explicit in a rules book or not. In some rules books, they explicitly put that, well, I'll see you in a few minutes.
Yes.
That the president is directly in charge of the clerk's office. And it's been standard practice here until our council, where we've been kind of trying to handle it as a council. So there's kind of some questions about whether or not we should, and the executive branch expectation is that the president is the manager of the clerks, of the clerk. The deputy clerk reports to the clerk and the clerk reports to the president. That's not how we've been running things internally exactly. Another model might be, although I haven't seen other places do this, but conceivably that the employees committee that you run might be a place to run to be kind of a committee that manages the clerk's office, or, but basically having some sort of clarity over how council, whether it's the individual president or some other system, how we are responsible for the clerk's office.
So we just need to like schedule a meeting, and this sounds like it's gonna be a several ongoing. Meetings.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And then
Having, oh,
I
sorry.
was gonna say, I think I have one more on my long list of things that I've been accumulating on the list. We've had a lot of discussions over the holdover. In the past, they used to have a holdover. All it took was a second and things were held over. We didn't take a vote on holding over. Robert, I think, knows all the intricacies of the debate because he had it with our previous corporation council. But I would be interested in making moves to go back to a holdover, just being a simple second, and that basically making sure that minority views on council at least have the power if there's a second.
Yeah.
As long as you're not completely alone, if you have a second,
Yeah.
to be able to get 2 more weeks to lobby, advocate, collect more information on an issue. I feel kind of strongly about that one, but I don't know, we may need to actually change laws or whatnot to make that happen, but to me, that's something I'm care about. So, yes, so that was just me kind of overviewing. I've been keeping a running list of things that I'm like, hey, this isn't really clear to me. And as a new voice on council, potentially, you're looking at this with fresh eyes and seeing things that don't make sense or things that aren't explicit in terms of how things are working.
Yeah.
And we all care about
Yeah.
transparency and
Yeah.
consistency and all that, and trying to figure out how do we turn that into a document. Does anyone have any other remarks? Otherwise, I'll consider a motion to adjourn. Okay.
No, I nothing, just, it's a very comprehensive list of stuff to work on.
I second that.
Okay, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Carl,
All
motion.
second,
All right, motion, say all in favor.
Aye.
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 Thank you.